share hopefully some positive thoughts. Now, Mary will introduce Judy Wicks, and we're so pleased to have you here, Judy. Mary?
Okay, hi, that's me. Welcome to all of you. So nice to see familiar faces. I'm so thrilled that we're all here together on Zoom once again. So Judy Wicks, there are many wonderful stories about Judith Wicks, but here's one of my favorites. Judy, I hope it's okay to tell this. I read it in a magazine, so it must be
Okay.
public information. In 1978, Judy made a big decision. She would leave both the fledgling Free People, the store that would later become Urban Outfitters, and the man who was its founder and also her husband, Dick Hayne. She was leaving Dick and driving in Philadelphia when she went through a red light and hit another car. Not so lucky, but not all bad. A witness to the accident happened to work at a restaurant called La Terrace and told Judy that there was an opening for a server. Her luck changed. She got the job, which she needed to repair her car, and soon worked her way up to becoming general manager. Judy learned a lot about the restaurant business and opened White Dog in 1983 on the first floor of her house. To say it was successful is a terrific understatement. 10 years after it began, Condé Nast Traveler magazine recognized White Dog Cafe as one of 50 American restaurants worth the journey. Under Judy's leadership, White Dog became a leader in the local food movement, purchasing sustainably grown produce from local family farmers and only humanely and naturally raised meat, poultry, and eggs. Searching for a vehicle to spread the farm purchasing practices of the White Dog to other restaurants, in 2000, Judy founded Fair Food, which now has numerous programs to connect local family farms with the urban marketplace. Judy's transition from what she calls me to we began when she realized that if she cared about the health of consumers in the industrial system, she would share what she knew with competitors. At that point, she turned over the list of local farmer suppliers from the White Dog Cafe to rival restaurants, a really, really brave thing to do. The founding mother of sustainability, as Judy has been called, sold White Dog in 2009. Did she slow down? Have any of us? Not at all. Since that time, she has founded a funding network called Circle of Aunts and Uncles. I always want to say aunts because I'm from New York, but I try to say aunts. Circle of Aunts and Uncles, all together now Pennsylvania, which unites Pennsylvania's urban and rural communities, and Proud Pennsylvania, which envisions a state legislature that represents the interests of our citizens rather than the interests of lobbyists and corporations. We're thrilled to have Judith Wicks with us today, and I will now turn the program over to her.
Well, thank you, Mary. That was a great quote. So the only inaccuracy was at the very beginning when they said that my ex-husband was the founder. He was the co-founder along with me. We were equal partners in the conception and the beginning of what became Urban Outfitters. Although I got out of that when I left him. He was my boyfriend from 5th grade. So things change over time. But thank you all for inviting me to be with you today. Your 10th program, that's kind of an anniversary in a sense. So happy anniversary. And I'm delighted to share my story with you. And I can't go into everything, but I'll hit some highlights. So we're going to try to screen share now. And let's see here.
No.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So now I have to figure out how to advance this. Here we go. Oh no, it's not going forward. Whoops. It went backward. Oh, okay. There we go. All right, so I'm going to start with the White Dog Cafe. Everybody's familiar, who lives in Philadelphia anyway, with the White Dog. And this is an old matchbox. I don't know if you remember that back in the days when people actually smoked cigarettes in restaurants. But anyway, I'm going to focus on 3 lessons that I learned at the White Dog. And the third one, actually, Mary alluded to in the introduction. But these 3: reimagining growth, protecting what you love, and moving from me to we. So reimagining growth, you know, in the business world, the mantra is grow or die, that you have to keep building your business bigger and bigger if you want to succeed. And I had many opportunities to do a chain of White Dogs, but I decided not to do that because I realized that it would take away what was made me most happy, which was the authentic relationships that I had with my customers and my suppliers, my staff, my community. And so rather than starting White Dog in someone else's community, I started a Black Cat in my own, next door to the White Dog. So that began my understanding of how to have a different way of growing your business, to look to see what the needs are of the community. We needed a store that sold responsible gifts, local and fair trade, that was needed in my own community. So I started that store, which really added to the vitality of our block. So then I started thinking about how we could reimagine growth, that growth doesn't have to be physical at all. It could be non-physical. We can grow by increasing our knowledge, by expanding our consciousness, by deepening our relationships, by developing our creativity, by building community and having more fun. So I focused on those different ways to grow the White Dog. Many of you may have come to our table talks where we had dinner with discussions on issues of public concern. There's Sue Ellen Klein. I don't know if anyone knows Sue Ellen. She was the director of community programs sitting on the other side of the speaker from me. We had community tours. This was a tour of the community gardens where people from all over the region would ride a motorized trolley around to view the gardens. We had all kinds of fun events. This is the pajama party brunch where people came wearing their pajamas to a New Year's Day brunch at the White Dog. This family came every year, and the grandmother, who's not pictured here, made them new flannel pajamas every New Year's Day to wear. So they all came in matching flannel pajamas and a new set every year. And I took pictures of everybody and had them on the wall. So when people arrived, they could find pictures of themselves maybe 20 years ago as a kid with their teddy bear in the pajamas. So I started seeing how chain stores are like invasive species. They go into other people's communities and smother out the indigenous businesses. And that got me thinking about how does nature grow? Because we need to grow in some ways to remain healthy. Well, nature goes deeper in place. Nature goes deeper in place to become more creative, more diverse, more resilient, more complex, all the opposite of what chains do that become simplified. And nature grows deeper in place to meet the needs of the ecosystem. So when we grow our businesses, we look to see what the needs of our ecosystem are and start that business, not be an invasive species. One of my favorite examples of this is Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, near the University of Michigan. And they had a very successful deli, still do, which could have been a chain, but instead of doing that, they looked to see what their community needed. They started a bakery, they started a creamery to make their own ice cream and cheese, all from local farmers. They started a coffee roasting business and 8 more businesses until it's probably even higher than this. The last I looked, their annual sales were 65 million. So this reduces imports. When you produce local products, you don't have to buy them from outside of your community, but rather you're supporting the local businesses by keeping that money in your community. It increases local self-reliance because more and more you're producing the products that your community needs. And also in this case, they were spreading ownership more broadly because Zingerman's made their star employees owners of these new businesses as they started expanding. So protecting what you love. This story begins in the Poconos, where actually I've been living all summer since Memorial Day. I'm back in Philly now, but I have a cabin in the Poconos. And I love the forest, to be in the woods up there, similar to where I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. And so there was a drought in in our part of the state around 1999. And I can remember driving up to the Poconos and arriving there to see how stressed the woods was, you know, that the leaves at the top of the trees were starting to fall in August. The creek was all dried up. The ferns that used to wave in the breeze, all green and lush, were all crinkled up like brown tissue paper on the floor of the forest. And as I walked along, there was just an eerie silence. Not even the birds were singing. There was just a fear in the air of fire. And at that moment, I realized that that this was global warming. I had never, we had been having programs at the White Dog on global warming, but I hadn't really thought about it in the context of my own home, and began to understand that parts of the world were going to have droughts and fires, and other parts of the world, storms and floods. And this was 20 years ago now. And we see that has taken place. So I became a tree hugger. I went over and I hugged a big oak tree, pressed my face against the bark, and promised that I would go back to Philadelphia and figure out how to sign up for renewable energy. That I had not taken that step. And it was seeing the land where I loved harmed that motivated me to take action. So the White Dog became the first business in Pennsylvania to buy 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. And back then it was wind power. So the third lesson from the White Dog was moving from me to we. And this is a picture of Judy and Mark Dorenstrike from Branch Creek Farm out in Berks County. Mark has passed away since this time, which I'm sad to say. But Mark once told me that good farming was the balance of masculine energy and feminine energy. And he defined masculine energy as being about efficiency and feminine energy about nurturing. So on your farm, if you have too much masculine energy and not enough nurturing, you may have a well-run farm, but you're not going to have the best tomatoes in the world without that nurturing. On the other hand, if you have too much feminine energy and not enough masculine, you might have great tomatoes and happy chickens, but you're going to go out of business because you're not using your time in an efficient way. So it's that balance that's important. And we're talking here not about gender, but about the masculine and feminine energies that are in each of us. So the worst example of this imbalance is in industrial agriculture. Like these mother female chickens in an egg production facility, it's all about efficiency. It's all about masculine energy. Like how little space can we give the chicken? How little light and air? How little food and water to get the cheapest egg possible? No nurturing whatsoever in this system. So at the White Dog, we switched to all pastured eggs, pastured chicken, local from the farmers, where we could actually go and see how the chickens were raised. Then I found out about the horrors of raising pork in this country, that the mother pigs, again, these are all female animals, by the way, the mother pigs are kept in these cages where they can't take a step forward or backwards. They're artificially inseminated. They're babies that are taken away prematurely. They are then inseminated again as though they were a piece of machinery in a factory. But pigs are mammals, like our dogs, like us. And all mammals share the capacity for basic emotions, of joy, of fear, of guilt, of affection. So I realized what a violation of our stewardship this is, to treat these mother pigs in this way, where they never have a breath of fresh air, never see sunlight, never move. And so I was horrified to think that the pork I served at the White Dog came from this system. So I just came into the kitchen and said, take all the pork off the menu, the pork chops, the ham, the bacon, until we can find a humane source for pork, which we did. It was a farm out in Lancaster County. This happens to be an Amish farm where we source pork. And this is the way pigs are supposed to live. They're very social creatures, very intelligent creatures. They say as intelligent as a 2-year-old child, and more intelligent than dogs. And they like to sleep in pig piles. They like to be with each other. They like to roll around in the dirt and so on. So from that moment on, we bought only pork that's raised in this way. And I've kept that promise now. I'm not in the restaurant business any longer, but I will never buy meat unless I know how it's raised, because I don't want to be part of the cruelty and just meat that's raised in that cruel way. So then I found out about beef cattle, about the horrible stockyards, and switched to all grass-fed beef. This is Dr. Bill Elkins from Buck Run Farm. He's still at it. I don't know how old he is, but he's in his 80s. He might be 85 or might be older than that. This picture's probably 20 years old. But anyway, he raised grass-fed Black Angus for the white dog. And we were the first restaurant to serve grass-fed beef, 100% grass-fed in Philadelphia. And Patti LaBelle used to come over, the singer, and pull up on the sidewalk, and her chauffeur would run in to get a Buck Run grass-fed burger, because she knew it was healthier for her. So the dairy business is another horrendous, treatment of the female cow. This is an industrial milking facility. And a lot of people don't know this, but in the dairy business, again, the mothers are artificially inseminated. And the minute the baby is born, the baby is separated from its mother, and then put in these pens where they are kept separate from each other, because the urge to suckle is so great that they can't be kept with each other, or they would suckle on each other and do harm. So they keep them isolated like this. So these newborn babies raised in separation like this, and the pain, the emotional pain for the mothers of having their babies taken away, and they wail and wail, and the babies as well, so that we humans could drink the baby's milk. And after I found that out, I stopped drinking cow's milk. There's only one farm, I'll show you coming up here, that I know that keeps the babies with the mothers. I'm sure there are others, but in our region, this farm is in New York. Anyway, there's now a lot of plant-based alternatives, dairy-free ice cream and milk. I now use oat milk for my coffee, and there's some great other dairy alternatives. The male calves are kept in these crates like this, so they can't move, so that their meat will be lily white and sold as veal for restaurants that, again, consumers often don't know that when a veal is white, that means that the babies have been kept in these crates unable to walk until they're slaughtered, so that they will not develop any muscles. So if anyone does order veal, make sure that it's grass-fed veal that's kept with a mother, and not coming from this torture chamber. So here's Hawthorne Valley in New York, and so I see I can get their yogurt up in the Poconos. So that's the only yogurt I eat is from Hawthorne Valley, and they keep the mothers and the babies together for 6 to 9 months. And they find, see, the whole thing here is that you make less money. That's what it's all about. So we're willing to destroy the lives of animals and exploit them in order to get cheaper milk. But, I'm sure that if people knew about this, they would rather pay a little bit more for milk. So not to torture these innocent animals. So they should be able to run free like this and have joy in life. So this is Dougie Newbald. She was our provider of goat cheese. She started off in Chestnut Hill until the neighbors started complaining that she was raising all these goats in Chestnut Hill. So she moved out to Chester County. She's retired now, but she used to say that when she kissed her goat's ears, it made the cheese better. And I always think of that when I see this lovely white ear of her Nubian goats, about her kissing her goat's ears. But anyway, I got to the point where I looked at my menu and I thought, gee, we finally done it. All of our meat and dairy products, egg products, so on, come from small family farms where the animals are treated with respect and kindness. This is our market niche. This is our competitive advantage. This is all about us. And then I had a transformational moment that Mary referred to in the introduction, when I realized that if I really cared about the farm animals and their welfare, if I really cared about the small farmers that were being driven out of business, if I cared about the environment that was being polluted by the concentration of animals in these animal factories, if I cared about the consumers who are eating meat that's full of antibiotics and hormones that they don't even realize, that rather than keeping this supply list to myself, I would share it with my competitors. And that was a turning point in my life that changed my life forever, really, because I felt as though I began to understand that there's no such thing as one sustainable business. We can only be part of a sustainable system. So up until that point, I thought that the best thing I could do was to have sustainable practices within the White Dog Cafe, buying from local farmers, composting waste, signing up for renewable electricity, all these different things that I prided myself in. But that's not enough. We need to change the whole system to be one that's works in harmony with nature, that respects other species, that we need to change the whole system, and that we need to share and cooperate in order to do that. Yes, we still compete, but the restaurants could work together to strengthen our food system and to support our local farmers. And then we compete to see among the chefs who can create the best dishes, out of this food, because you need that friendly competition, but we're not trying to put the others out of business. It's a friendly competition, and it's a cooperative system to build a healthier food system in our region. So I started Fair Food, a nonprofit back in 2000 to connect the urban marketplace with the local farmers. For many years, we put out the local food guide to guide consumers towards where to buy local food, what restaurants carried it, how you could sign up for CSA, where the farmers markets were, and so on. Fair Food just closed a year ago after 19 years. But I feel like we did our job, that we enlightened chefs, we strengthened the food system. There's still more to do, but we had a big impact. Then I turned to a farmer. This is Glenn Brendel. This was a photo was taken at the Dance of the Ripe Tomatoes that we used to have every fall to thank our farmers. But I asked Glenn, who was bringing me 2 pigs a week. We would order 2 pigs. We would use all the meat from the pig, because that's the best way for the farmers to buy the whole pig, not just buy the bacon or the pork chops. And our chef, Kevin Klaus, would make, pork sliders for the bar, sausages. We would use the whole animal. So Glenn was bringing us 2 whole pigs a week. And so I said to him, Glenn, would you like to expand your business and deliver pastured pork to other restaurants in town? And he said, yes. I said, well, what's holding you back? And he said he needed a refrigerated truck so that he could deliver to many restaurants on his route, and that he needed to borrow $30,000. So I loaned him the $30,000, and he bought the refrigerated truck so that he could deliver to more restaurants in Philadelphia. So this is what I mean from moving from me to we, that we need to move from individualism to community. We have to move from competition to cooperation, from hoarding to sharing, and from fear of not having enough for ourselves to love. So I want to just tell a brief story, because people have asked me, well, how did you have the courage to make that decision? And I realized that some of it went back to an experience I had right after college, where I lived in an Eskimo village for a year as a Vista volunteer in Alaska. And there I met here I am back in 1969 with my little dog, Augie. Agiok means star in Yupik and Eskimo language. So there's a little star on his forehead. So we named him Agiok, and Augie for short. I'm wearing my kuspek. It's a Eskimo dress, and my mucklucks are Eskimo boots made out of seal skin. So the Eskimos their whole culture was totally different from ours. They believed they didn't know the idea of hoarding more than you needed was unknown to them. They shared everything. If you asked an Eskimo, or if you say to them, "Hey, I like your necklace," the Eskimo will take it off and give it to you, because they don't believe in envy. And this was such a shock to me after living in our consumer society back home. As an example of this, in the spring, when a man caught his first seal of the season, his wife would have a seal party at her home. And I remember the spring morning when someone came knocking on my door, and I opened it, and there was an Eskimo woman, and she was beckoning to me follow me, seal party, party, come. So I followed her to one of the other houses, and the women were all gathered there and learned of this tradition that the seal meat would be divided equally between all the families. And then after the meat was divided, anything else that the family had accumulated during the year that they didn't need to survive, whether it was canned goods or some fabric or some buttons or whatever, they would give it away to the others. And then at the end, they would throw candy up into the air. This is the ending ceremony, bubble gum and root beer barrels and whatnot into the air as a symbol, of sharing. So this is a basic principle of life, reciprocity, that we don't take more than we give. I remember Confucius said that all his teachings could be wrapped up into the same word of reciprocity. But I found that indigenous people totally understand this. This is how they live. And that our white Western culture is taking more than we're giving. From the animals, from nature, from each other. I mean, we are so out of balance in terms of taking. And that's why, we're destroying the earth basically by the way we live and cooperate, that we don't live by this basic principle of life, of the natural flow of giving and receiving. We're always on the lookout for ourselves, or too often we are. So the Eskimos were the happiest people I've ever met. And I realized it was because their security and happiness did not depend on money. They didn't have money. Their happiness depended on community. And they were just so much fun. They just laughed all the time. The big highlight of the week was when the mail plane came up. We'd hear this little hum up in the distance, and everybody would run out of their houses to see who could spot the plane first. It would be like a little speck in the sky. And then it would land on the river in the winter on skis, and in the summer on pontoons. And everybody in the village would go tearing, down to the river to get the mail. And I thought it was amazing. And then, before long, I was right there running down too, because, that was the only way to hear from home. There were no phones or radio stations that we could get. We were in total isolation. So getting a letter from home was so important. So we'd all run down to the river and escort the postman back to, he'd bring a sled down there and put the mail in the sled and go back to his house. And we'd all sit on the floor in the postmaster's house, and he would hand out the letters to everybody in the community. And each time he handed a letter to somebody, he would say something, and everybody would start roaring with laughter. And I couldn't understand what they were talking because they're talking in Yupik. But I finally figured out that most of the time he was saying something about sex. I bet this is a letter from your lover or whatever, and everybody would be roaring. So they were just such happy people. It made a big impression on me. So, over time, I've realized that the people who have influenced me most in my life have been indigenous people. First, there were the Eskimos. Second, the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico, that had their revolution on the day that NAFTA went into effect in January of 1994. And I started going down there to better understand what this was about. And I found that their revolution was about local self-reliance and their resistance against joining the global economy. What they were saying is that they wanted to continue to have self-reliance in food, to grow their own corn and beans, to sell it in the domestic marketplace. They wanted to have their own culture and not be sucked into the Western global culture. They wanted to wear clothes that their women had so beautifully made over hundreds or thousands of years, and not end up in the maquiladoras, the sweatshops along the border, making clothes to be exported to the United States and Europe. They wanted to maintain their self-reliance. And I never thought about self-reliance before. When I went down there, I went down to help the people there. But then I began to understand that what was happening in Chiapas, the way that the farmers were being destroyed in Chiapas, was the same that was happening in Pennsylvania, that our farmers also were being threatened by large corporations, and that the farm bill that gives huge subsidies to the corporations basically substitutes junk food, so that a bag of potato chips is so much cheaper than an apple. So it's made a very unlevel playing field that favors large corporations and an unhealthy diet. There's so many things I could say about this in terms of the difference in nutritional value and taste between local food and corporate food that's shipped long distance, because the taste and the nutrients have been bred out of food to maintain longer shelf life and conformity of size so that it can be shipped by these large corporations. Anyway, I could go so many different directions here, but the point I want to make is that around the world, communities have lost their local self-reliance and have become dependent on corporations to deliver their food, deliver their clothes, deliver their energy, deliver their building materials, all the things we need to survive. We're dependent on large corporations to deliver us on long distance supply chains. So I began to see that a sustainable global economy is made up of a network of sustainable local economies, that we're never going to have a sustainable global economy because we need to have local self-reliance, that a sustainable local economy has self-reliance in basic needs so that we can survive without global trade, that we can produce our own food, our own energy, our own clothing, our own building materials, and our own plant medicines as much as possible, and not be reliant on these global supply chains. And then we can trade globally, nationally, globally, for things that we have in excess, like we have probably in Pennsylvania, have a lot of extra apples, or corn, tomatoes, whatever. And we also can export what is special about our region, an innovation, a fashion, a certain cheese or a wine or whatever, that we will always have global trade and what is unique, about our region. But we need to have local self-reliance first. And so this was around the same time that everything was becoming clear to me, around the turn of the century, really. And so from there, I started the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia in 2001, and also co-founded a national group, BALI, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, which was a network of these local business alliances. And we all believe that that we needed to relocalize our economies. So then I ended up getting so immersed in this work about localization that I ended up traveling quite a bit to speak about it. I even spoke in India and Australia, all over the place. And so it drew me away from the white dog, and I had to make a decision whether to recommit myself to the business or to sell it. So I decided to sell it at the end of 2009, and then I took some time off to write a book. Good Morning, Beautiful Business. So if anybody is enjoying this story, there's so much more to say in my book, which is people tell me it's a fun read. So if you haven't read it yet, I hope you'll take the time to do so. It's a great women's story as well. So another time I was greatly impressed and influenced and inspired by Indigenous people was going to Standing Rock. And I love this photograph so much that I actually purchased the photograph from the photographer and have a blown up photo on the wall in my living room, because it's just such a perfect representation of what was happening at Standing Rock, where the Indigenous people were, in all their vulnerability and simplicity, were standing up to the might of the fossil fuel industry, who brought violence against these peaceful protesters who did not want the pipeline to go under the Missouri River, which is a sacred river to them. And it had already been a lot of oil spills in the area. And they recently did win their fight in court, by the way, to stop the flow of oil through this pipeline. And I could do a whole lecture just on Standing Rock. I'll tell you, again, I experienced a different set of values, when I was at Standing Rock. Again, one of sharing, cooperation, love. They're so forgiving. Like when the military would beat them up, and some people were severely injured. No one was killed, thank goodness, during that standoff that went for several months. I went out there at Thanksgiving time and brought 30 people to cook Thanksgiving dinner for the water protectors. But one of the things I learned out there was the prophecy of the black snake. The elders would tell the story that originated 1,000 years ago, that at some point in time, a black snake would emerge out of the ground and move across the land, causing great sorrow and hurt and hardship. And that they had finally identified that the black snake is the fossil fuel industry and the pipelines that are bringing the oil across the land. And they went on to say that if the people of the world do not unite to slay the black snake, that the world will end. And that's where we are right now. Will we have the will to organize to stop the fossil fuel companies from destroying the world, or will we go along business as usual? So when I got, and then the elders said, when you get home, find the black snake in your own location and help to kill the black snake. So when I got back to Pennsylvania, I realized that the black snake was fracking. So I went up to Dimmock where they were doing fracking. And here's a fellow that showed us the drinking water, how it had been polluted by the fracking chemicals. Then I was inspired to put solar on my roof. I didn't want to have anything to do with fracking, which I saw as being really an evil thing, and that it was threatening our drinking water. They have not allowed fracking in the Delaware River Basin, although the corporations are still trying to overcome that, but it's ruined the drinking water in communities throughout Pennsylvania. So I decided I would not buy natural gas anymore. So I put solar on my roof. I transitioned my house to all electric. This is a convection induction stovetop. It's electric, but it unlike other, like I was cringing at the idea of having an electric stove because you don't have much control compared to gas. But with an induction stovetop, you have immense control. These little dots on here are all degrees of heat. So it works by electric, but it has a different process where it makes these molecules, it makes the magnets whirl around under the glass that make the molecules in the iron of the pans. You have to have an iron-based pan, not doesn't have to be all cast iron, but stainless steel that has enough iron in it. And so it makes the molecules in the iron move around so fast that the pan heats. So there's no flames that go out into the room. It just heats the pan. So it's a very efficient way of heating. I changed all the appliances in my house and called the gas company, turned it off. So I'm 100% electric. And then I bought an electric car, 100% electric car. This is parked in front of my house on Fiddler Square, where I plug in. You can see the electric cord going from my balcony into the tree, down the tree, and into my car. So that's how I charge my car. So now my whole house and my car are all on sustainable electricity. And I don't produce enough on my roof from my solar panels to heat and cool my whole house. But I save enough money from that to not pay more, because electric heat costs more than the natural gas. But when you add solar to it, you financially come out ahead. So in this whole process, I'm spending less because I have no gas bill whatsoever. And my electric bill went up, but not as much as I was paying for gas. So overall, I'm ahead financially, and I'm 100% renewable energy. The electricity that I buy from the grid comes from a third-party supplier, and that's one of the things that all of you can do, is to make sure that the electricity that you're buying is renewable. And you can do that. Just call up Pico and tell them you want to switch. The company I use, that I recommend, is called Community Energy. Their offices are in Radnor. So I contract with them, and it comes through the grid, just like through the Pico grid, and Pico charges you for it. But you're only paying for renewable energy. So all my energy in my house is all produced by solar. Now, of course, the electrons are all mixed together, but your dollars are only paying for renewable when you sign up for a third-party supplier. So the other thing I was concerned about are the pipelines. These are highly flammable natural gas pipelines. Some are liquid gas, others are gassy gas. But you can see how close they are to these houses out in the suburbs. And this is a permanent installation. So these people are living next door to these highly flammable pipelines, if you can imagine that. It's not just the construction, but they're going to be there forever. So the people were horrified by this, and I joined in protesting, and this was closing down a drill site out in Lancaster County. So we became the Grill Rig 5 that we were arrested for closing down this gas drilling well that's putting in a pipeline. So I saw that all these communities were spending all this time and money to try and stop the fossil fuels to kill the black snake. But our state politicians were all siding with the large corporations. So I realized that it was a political struggle. And so I started Proud Pennsylvania. And if you care, you could go to proudpennsylvania.org to see our endorsements for the fall. We're trying to raise money for candidates across the state who will sign a pledge not to take money from the fossil fuel industry. And who commit themselves to moving to 100% renewal, to phasing out fracking, to reaching 100% renewable within a given time frame, and to help build a green economy. So in the last election, well, just to say here that the fossil fuel legacy in Pennsylvania goes back hundreds of years, that our state legislature has been unduly influenced by the fossil fuel industry for hundreds of years, starting with coal. And then, of course, as we know, oil well drilling was discovered in Pennsylvania, in Titusville, PA. And for 50 years, Pennsylvania was the world's capital for oil before oil was discovered in Texas. So we have a long history of this. And of course, now on the right-hand side, you'll see a fracking well. So it's a very powerful industry. So we were able to, in the last election, elect a number of our candidates, Elizabeth Fiedler, who some of you might know because she's from Philly, Summer Lee from Allegheny County, Danielle Fried-Otten in Chester County, who has a tough race because she's being targeted by the fossil fuel industry because she's been a real champion for renewable energy and anti-fracking. It was her house where the pipelines are going right by her house and through her community. She's a real fighter. Tim Kearney from Swarthmore, a state senator, and Katie Muth from Chester and Montgomery, also a state senator. So those are some of the candidates that won last time. And for our slate of candidates this time, you can go to proudpennsylvania.org. So this is the main nonprofit that I'm working on right now, All Together Now Pennsylvania. And we are working to unite urban and rural communities to build regional economies that work for all of us and nature too. So by working together to build local economies, we're moving power, wealth, and opportunity from these distant corporations to our own communities through local production of our basic needs. And this is urgent, that we have a climate change emergency, that we can no longer be dependent on these long distance supply chains to bring us our basic needs, because they're going to become more and more disrupted by chaotic weather and social upheaval. So it's really about our own survival that we localize our economies. And so regional self-reliance for food, fuel, and fiber, I feel, is the common ground politically between the left and the right. That the right has long valued self-reliance and the left valued community. And so you put the two together, community self-reliance or regional self-reliance is, I think, a common ground. And you really do hear this, that Trump supporters and, say, Bernie Sanders supporters, as being on the opposite sides, politically, are both anti-corporate. They both groups feel that corporations have destroyed our democracy and have taken over our economy and stolen our wealth, basically. So I feel like there's great opportunity to bring together the left and the right around this concept of local production of our basic needs, local self-reliance. So we have 6 priorities. We actually just added a 7th recently for our regional economies: local food, renewable energy, industrial hemp, plant medicine, zero waste, local tourism, and we added clothing and textiles. So in local food, this is Catherine Rappin, who is the coordinator for our local food coalition. They have formed the Pennsylvania Grain Coalition, so they're strengthening the supply chains, starting with the grain farmers, Meadowbrook Farm up on the upper left, to a mill, a local mill. This is in Doylestown, to Philadelphia, where Pete, the owner of Philly Bread, buys local grains for his bread. So that's what we're trying to do, is strengthen these local supply chains, that strengthen the farmers and strengthen the local food enterprises to build these local supply chains, for our region. So the Pennsylvania Grain Coalition during the pandemic put together a grain box that has local flour, cooking oil, beans, grains, and so on, to sell them as a box of, it's called a Pennsylvania Pantry Box. And then with the profits of selling the box, we use those profits to give away free boxes to low-income families through Mighty Writers. So we also published a guide to local food during the pandemic. If you go to our website, altogetherNowPA.org, you'll see a guide to local food because with the collapse of the restaurant industry, a lot of farmers who delivered to restaurants were left stranded, and so they needed to find ways to connect directly to households. And so we helped to do that by letting households know how to connect directly with farmers. And so this is still relevant now. In fact, the pandemic has blown the cover off the industrial food system. The centralized industrial system really failed. We saw photographs of, pouring milk down the drain, killing all the pigs because they couldn't get them to market. So the centralized system failed. And meanwhile, the local system grew and will continue to grow. Renewable energy, making sure that we have access. I mean, one of the projects that we want to start it all together now is to help put solar panels on low-income urban and rural rooftops. And industrial hemp was the first coalition I started because hemp was illegal for 80 years. They say that was largely because of DuPont. They didn't want competition with polyesters, and it used to be during colonial times that clothes were made from hemp. The flag, Betsy Ross's flag, was made of hemp. The Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. All the sails of the ships were hemp. So it was made illegal. They say by Hearst, paper companies that didn't want the competition with paper, and clothing, cotton and polyesters that didn't want the competition there. But anyway, and then there were others who didn't like hemp because you could grow marijuana hidden in the hemp, and there was no way to stop that, identify which was which unless you smoked it. You can't get high on hemp. Plant medicine, here we're educating people about how we can use plant medicines as an alternative to pharmaceuticals. This is our Plant Medicine Coalition. We're having our first gathering at the Barefoot Botanicals near Doylestown of the businesses along the supply chain. And so you'll be hearing more about this. We just got our first funding. So we've been working a year and a half with just volunteers. Someone's knocking on my door, but I guess I'm just gonna let it go. So sorry. Here's this is on the right, Benjamin Davis from Wild Fox Farms. He grows hemp for CBD, and he is a vertical business. So he grows the hemp, processes it into CBD, and then sells it under his own brand, Wild Fox Provisions. And I use his CBD for sleeping. It's a really great product. And so that's what we're trying to connect people to, if they want CBD, to get it from a local farmer. And this is on the left, Danielle Burgess. He's a state rep from North Philadelphia. So he was coming to understand more about local CBD for his constituents. Here's their product. They have, this is what I use on the far left, Farmer's Batch, 1500 milligrams for sleeping. And they also have hemp honey and hemp tea and so on. We have a Zero Waste Coalition. This is Remark Glass. They use recycled bottles to blow into new objects. Local tourism, we're trying to encourage, we haven't started this campaign yet, but the idea is to organize supply chain tours. So we'll go on a tour to see where the grain is raised, go to a grain farm, then go to a mill, and then see how it's used for baking bread and then for brewers to brew beer. And so the idea here is to show urbanites that rather than flying off to London or Paris, we could go to a small town in Pennsylvania to patronize the restaurants and the stores on these main streets that need our business. Local investment is another big part of this. And I just wanted to show you, here are some ways where I have my savings right now. The Reinvestment Fund in Philadelphia, reinvestment.com, the minimum investment, $1,000. The return, depending on how long you have it in there, is 1.5 to 4% interest. I had my entire savings in there over 15 years ago. I put it in. At that point, it was 5%. So I had it in for 15 years at 5%, and it was doing good. As we know, it's used for daycare centers, charter schools, affordable housing here in Philadelphia, and they continue to have a Philadelphia fund where you can put money. I also have money at RSF Social Finance. It's out in California, but they capitalize projects all over the country. Again, it's for underserved neighborhoods, for healthy food, for childcare, for sustainable energy, and so on. And then there's also Calvert Foundation Community Investments, which is a national one. So it's not directed locally, but it's directed to those types of businesses. And when I had the White Dog, we had an IRA, a self something or other IRA, where people could choose to have their IRA at Calvert. So it would do all good and not in the stock market at all. So in terms of local financing, I wanted to mention the Circle of Aunts and Uncles. And we have about 45 aunts and uncles. And the idea here is to provide capital for entrepreneurs that don't have family and friends stage money. So I started this 5 years ago. So we make loans of up to $12,000 for 3 years at 3%. And our fund is managed by the Enterprise Center. So we have 40 aunts and uncles. The initial contribution is $2,000, and then $1,000 a year in dues. And then we also contribute social capital to meet with the entrepreneurs to help them with making connections for business and so on. We gather in individual homes. This is in Louise and David Strawbridge's home, where we have dinner together and bring wine and so on. And then the entrepreneur presents to us. It's not like a Shark Tank. We want everybody to get the loan. And so then we form a sub-circle. After we make a loan, we form a sub-circle around each entrepreneur. This is Little Pop Shop, Jeannie Chung. This used to be on 20th Street. She closed her place there, but she still has one in West Philly, and she also sells wholesale. So I don't know, maybe some people know Sam Little and Ted Reed and so on. And so that's our little sub-circle. This is Loboma. It's a Brazilian brother and sister, a clothing company. I'm actually today wearing a Loboma top and black pants. I'm picking out a jacket that I want to buy from them. Here's Eleanor Davis. And we would have a shopping night at Loboma. So we'd have some wine and cheese and whatnot. And we spent $4,000 in 2 hours shopping, and it's a lot of fun. So altogether, we've made 22 loans to 18 entrepreneurs, totaling $175,000. And we've made actually more loans since this time when I put the slide together. I like to say that we've funded a butcher, a baker, and ice cream makers. So this is Primal Supply Meats. Heather Tomlinson is the owner. She's a female butcher, and she's just doing great during the pandemic. We've been promoting her business because she delivers to your home, so you can get all pastured meats, all pastured beef and pastured pork, free range chickens, all those from local farms delivered to your door. She has 2 stores. I'm not sure what the status is now with COVID. I assume you can go to the store now, but if not, you can have it delivered. The baker, that's Philly bread, Pete Merzbacher. He just changed the name actually to Merzbacher's Bakery rather than Philly bread, but he has a Philly muffin, which is my favorite of his products. Here's one of our local ice cream companies, Zaz Ice Cream. And again, all from local farms. All the milk is from local farms. So we feel like when we fund these food businesses, that we're also helping the farmers because they buy their products from local farmers. This is Blue Kind from Franny Lou's Porch, a coffee shop in Kensington. She buys all fair trade coffee, tea, fair trade sugar, which is a big thing because it's more expensive. And she buys her products for her salads and sandwiches from local farmers through the common market. This is one of our newer bars, Thane Wright from Bowers Cafe on 12th Street. He also has a coffee shop, and he also has cured meats and with sandwiches and so on. This is Grant Boulevard is the name of the company with Kimberly McCone. She prints things on t-shirts, and she also makes fashions up by disassembling used clothes and then redesigning them. So we feel that collaboratively we're working together, entrepreneurs and the aunts and uncles, toward a shared vision, and that this brings us a collective joy, to do this work together. So back in the 60s, Dr. King called for a revolution of values to move us from a thing-oriented society to a people-oriented society. And I feel like that is what is needed today to fight materialism. And in our culture, we're conditioned to feel full if we don't get the lowest price, when we shop, or the highest return when we invest, without any regard to the consequences to these actions to workers and animals and communities and our natural world. So we have to move towards building a conscious economy and make our economic decisions not to maximize material wealth, but to maximize the health and well-being of our communities and ecosystems, while making a fair return and leaving a viable future. So here's 2 quotes I love from Gary Snyder. The best thing you can do for the planet is to stay at home. Find your place in the planet, dig in, and take responsibility from there. So this is the first step I feel that people need to make, is to take responsibility for your place, whether it's a small town or a city or whatever, and to ask yourself, where does my food come from? Are my food dollars building my local food economy? Are they helping my local farmers? Am I helping to build these local supply chains in how I grow my food? Am I conscious about the treatment of the animals when I grow my food? Where does my energy come from? How is it produced? Is my energy dollars adding to the problems of climate change, or am I part of the solution? Where do my clothes come from? Are they locally made? Are they helping local entrepreneurs? Are those local entrepreneurs sustainable in the fabrics they use and the dyes and so on? The fashion industry is one of the most polluting. Next to oil and gas, the fashion industry is supposedly the most polluting in the world, and a lot of it is from the fast fashion of all these sweatshops and whatnot. So I think that's what we need to do, is just to analyze where we get things from, how our dollars make a difference. Where is our investments? Is our investments supporting a system that's destroying the earth, or are we investing our money in a way that is creating an alternative? I wanted to say it all together now is we're creating a fund. It's not going to be ready for another year or so, but we're creating a fund so people can invest in our fund and know that we're going to be loaning this money and making investments in the companies that are local companies that are building our local supply chains. These will be like larger investments. The aunts and uncles only goes up to 12,000. So we want to be able to make loans of 50,000, 100,000. So we're going to be building this fund to do that. So in the end, I think the most important thing is to understand is that we all belong to the vibrant community of life on Earth. We all belong to the web of life. And when we feel that connection. We can feel, the suffering of the pigs or the struggling of the farmers, because we're all part of the same community. And I feel like if we're ever going to transform our economy from one that's life destroying to one that's life giving, it begins with awakening our hearts, the heart of the entrepreneur, the heart of the investor, and the heart of all of us as consumers. So like when I made that crucial decision long ago to share with my competitors, at first I was afraid to do that. I was afraid that my sales would go down, that my profits would go down, I might even go out of business. And I didn't make that decision because I figured out in my head, hey, this is the right thing to do. I made the decision because I love the pigs. I felt it in my heart. I feel that my love of animals, of nature, of community was greater than my fear. And when we love our places and take responsibility for them, and when we open our hearts to what really matters to us and lead with love, when we make our economic decisions, that's how we can build a just, sustainable, and joyful economy. And if we're successful in leaving a viable future for our children and the children of all species, it's going to be because we as human beings have evolved to take our rightful place in the web of life, no longer as exploiters and takers, but as lovers of life and in full service of life. So I'm going to stop there and stop share. And I think we're going to open up to questions. Thank you for your attention.
Judy, I learned so much from that. Oh my goodness. And I
Good.
so appreciate your activism and commitment to this. It's something that we'll take with us.
Oh, good. Well,
Very
thank you.
inspirational.
Thank you.
So, questions?
Yes, I have a question. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Janet Stern. I live in Chestnut Hill.
Uh-huh.
Judy, you may not remember this, but I worked at your restaurant when I was at law school.
Oh, wow. That's
And
amazing.
the other thing I wanted to say is that I have solar panels on my house in Chestnut Hill, and there's no way to store the power. So when I lose power, I can't access the power from the solar panels. And I was wondering if anybody has any ideas or suggestions for how we can deal with this.
Well, you can get a battery, and they've been coming down in price. I actually was just looking into that. You can get a battery that will store your excess energy, and then so that you can use it, for instance, at night or when the power goes out or whatever.
I was told that Tesla was patenting a battery and that he used them all up and there weren't any available. So if you have any,
There's a local company called Solar States.
okay.
Solar States, they're the ones that installed my solar, and I know that they are selling battery systems.
Okay.
I recommend them because they're locally owned, and they also hire from inner city schools. They've been training young people in how to install solar, and a lot of their staff now have come about in that way.
All right. I will research that. And if for any reason I have a problem, I will nudge you.
Okay, great. Well, good for you for putting your solar up.
And thank you very much for making it possible for me to pay my bills when I was in law school.
Okay, well, great.
Mm.
So is it okay, Chris, if I jump in with a question?
Sure, please.
So Judy, my name is Allison Goodner. I'm the director of the Center for Public Purpose over at the William Penn Charter School.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much for your talk, but also my class today, actually, the question was, we were exploring was, what would our world look like if we only took what we needed? So this was so perfect.
Right.
We've been reading sections from Braiding Sweetgrass.
Oh, I love that book.
So I actually was just curious. I mean, and you can put them into chat. I don't want to take too much time, but one of the things I am looking for is literature, right? So to also help students, thinking about literature that's, I mean, Braiding Sweetgrass is applicable for me. It's also for students that I think middle to high school can access it, but to start thinking about just envisioning it differently, right? And so I was put onto a couple other great books by some friends of mine that do work in California. But I don't know if you have any other must read either books or articles that you feel like that's helped you shape your thinking specifically around this concept of sort of taking what you need and
Right.
community.
Well, I'm sure there are, to tell you the truth, I'm not much of a reader. I'm so busy. I'm so busy organizing. And I'm in some ways self-taught because I've learned by doing. I experiment. And when I hear about something, I try to implement it at the White Dog. And now I'm doing it as a homeowner. And then I learn from that and share what I learn. And so I'm not much of a book person, but I do appreciate books. And I did happen to read at least part of Braiding Sweetgrass. That's what I tend to do. I order a book, I read the first part, and then I run out of time. So I have mountains of books all around me. But Bill McKibben has written great books about climate change and what we need to do. He has so many, I don't know which one to recommend. Naomi Klein has some really good books. I'm trying to think. Again, she's written several, and I don't know which one of them to suggest. But
the authors are great. That's a good starting point.
Yeah, and of course, my book, "Good Morning, Beautiful Business."
Yeah,
students might enjoy that because it's Philadelphia based.
Yes, we also have an entrepreneur, like a social entrepreneurship group and a green club. So I actually, I just actually went on to get your book to talk with another faculty advisor about maybe some co-readings between those groups to explore those things in Philadelphia. So
Great. Well, good luck. I'm glad you're teaching the students these good things. My daughter went to Penn Charter for a few years, but yeah.
I have a question that I put into chat. Let me see, there's some other questions. You have so much wonderful activities going on. What are your funding needs and how are you going about that moving forward? I know you mentioned the aunts and uncles, and which is a wonderful program, but is that a big issue? I would think it is for your nonprofit.
Yeah, well, all together now, we're just starting to get some funding, and I'm a volunteer, so I work full time as the executive director for now. I don't want to be the executive director much longer because it's a lot of work for a 73-year-old, and really it's a lot of work to launch anything that's new. So I basically work every day. I mean, not every minute of the day, but it's a lot of work. So I want to transition to a paid staff. So we did get two $20,000 grants recently, and we have a $150,000 grant coming in November. And all three of those sources were groups that supported Bali when I started the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies 20 years ago. So I'm going back 20 years to dig up those contacts. So I've just starting October 1st, I now have a deputy director 4 days a week, and a CFO 1 day a week. And so we're gradually going to be adding staff to help me. And at some point I want to hire an executive director. So if anybody cares to donate, if you go to altogetherNowPA.org, there is a donate button there. Or you can also send a check. It'll tell you where to send it. We're a partner in a large organization called the Urban Affairs Coalition. It was started by Charlie Bowser back in the 50 years ago. He had run for mayor. He was, I think, the first Black candidate for mayor years ago. But anyway, he started it as a racial justice organization. But what they do is provide the back office functions for nonprofits. So like they do our payroll, benefits, insurance, audits, taxes, all those things are covered by the Urban Affairs Coalition, and they hold the 501c3. So we're at least starting off this way. We may end up getting our own 501c3 eventually, but I didn't want to have to deal with all that with payroll and the legal stuff and whatnot right now, because I just want to focus my energies on the work. So when you make a contribution to Altogether Now PA, it's directed through the Urban Affairs Coalition into our separate fund there. So like checks are made out to UAC / Altogether Now. It'll say on the donation page how to do that, but I haven't started a fundraising campaign, you know, among citizens, because I wanted to I wanted to have at least one staff person, because I'm barely able to deal with all the inquiries and so on now. But I didn't want to publicize ourselves too far too soon. But we will be doing some kind of, you know, fundraising campaigns. And I think what we're going to do is establish like a membership to the organization. So you can sign up to be a member on a sliding scale, you know, like starting at $10 or something for students. So in that way people can join. And we're also going to have a volunteer program, and we haven't started that yet because again, it's a lot of work to manage volunteers. So once I have a staff person that can do that, we're going to identify jobs that can be done by volunteers, because this is like all together now, you know, to build this a sustainable and fair local economy. And then, as I said, that we're going to have an investment fund too. We have two businesses. Just a little bit more detail about this. As we build these local supply chains, when we see a gap in the supply chain, then we create a social enterprise to fill that gap. So right now we're working on a social enterprise that uses hempcrete, and hempcrete is made from the woody core of the hemp plant. It's chipped up and mixed with lime and water to form a substance that takes the place of that pink fiberglass stuff or styrofoam, which are both toxic substances. So like if you're building a wall with hempcrete or retrofitting a home, you have the wooden studs because hempcrete is not weight bearing. Then you have a mold around it, so and pour the hempcrete in or blow it in. It can be blown or poured. So it's a sealed wall with no gaps. So when you have a hempcrete wall, not only is it healthy as opposed to these toxins that are often in our building materials, but your heating and air conditioning bills will go down anywhere from 30 to 60%, you know, when you use hempcrete, because it doesn't have all those spaces. Like if you use that pink insulation stuff, you have the wooden joists, and then you cut the pink stuff in between. And so it's not solid. So the hempcrete walls are like solid, and they're just a good feeling. It's a rot resistant, pest resistant, fire retardant, all these things. So anyway, long story short, we're working on a building material made out of hempcrete that will be used in affordable housing. And eventually this social enterprise will be a workers cooperative, and it will provide jobs in North Philadelphia. I'm so excited about this business, and will be just a perfect example of what we're trying to do. And so when we're ready, we'll be letting our mailing list. And that's one thing you all could do, is just to join the mailing list for Altogether Now, PA.org, and join the mailing list, because then when they have an announcement to make, you'll hear about it. So that will be one of them when we're looking for investors, you know, for this hempcrete business that will provide jobs in North Philly and provide building supplies for affordable housing up there. And then another business that we're working on, hemp is our oldest coalition. It's a year and a half old now. So that's why the businesses are developing there first. But we're making a dairy alternative out of hemp milk. So it's going to be hemp, flax, and oat, the three grains together, to make a very nutritious and tasty alternative to dairy for cereal and coffee and so on. So that's in production. But those are the types of businesses that we're trying to catalyze, and each of them will be a social enterprise where it'll be worker owned or farmer owned, and so on. And so that'll be an exciting way to participate by helping to invest in these businesses when we're ready for that.
Great, thanks. We have two more questions I see here. Jane Moss is asking, do you think people are shifting to a more local orientation in some ways during COVID?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been just amazing to see how the local food system has strengthened. I mentioned earlier in the talk about how the centralized industrial system broke down, and the store shelves were empty. So, I mean, just to give you an example of a positive story, Green Meadow Farm, actually the farm where I used to buy my 2 pigs a week, and I loaned them the money for the truck. All their business was through restaurants, and so then all of a sudden the restaurants closed. So they they developed a food box made up of the products of their farms, as well as the products of some of the Mennonite farmers around them. And then they used a couple of the restaurants that stayed open for takeout. One is like the Sidecar in near me at 22nd and Christian as drop-off places. So you could order these boxes online from them. And you can also get like whole chickens, free-range chickens, which I love. They're so tasty. So that's what I would order. And they've been able to maintain their income, the same income before COVID as during COVID, by selling directly to households. So I think, and Primal Supply Meats, I showed a slide of Heather earlier. Her business has expanded tremendously during COVID because households are becoming more aware of what's available locally as the corporate system was breaking down. So this is a huge boost to us. I also think that it's kind of an intuitive feeling during climate change and the pandemic. The intuition that guides us towards local self-reliance, I think, is very strong. I think that, that this has started a while ago with the popularity of farmers markets, that people go to farmers markets because it makes them happy to meet the farmer and meet their neighbors. But there's also something intuitive or instinctual, about supporting local farmers, to build that system. And I think I think that localization is happening, and that climate change and the pandemics are fueling this. Somebody's ringing my doorbell again, so maybe one more question. I better see if I can find out who's down there.
Nancy Scharf has asked, do you think Philadelphia is ahead because of your work, yes, of other similar sized cities in shifting to a local orientation?
Well, I think that, certainly because, in the food area, because I think the White Dog was really a national leader in the farm to table movement. And with Fair Food, assisting the chefs to find the match up with the farmers, I think for sure, and hopefully we also boosted people buying renewable energy through, again, being a model of that. We had a little sign on our door, 100% renewable electricity. So I hope we've made a difference here and made Philadelphia a more self-reliant and a happier place.
I think so. I guess the only other closing observation I have is that your virtues are so pure, and I love that you're developing partnerships based on your virtues, which is absolutely wonderful. We hope you will keep at it for sure and keep influencing others. I think we don't have any more questions. You have to answer your doorbell.
Okay.
But thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great spending time with all of you.
Great. That was really great.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
you.
And everybody, if you're still on, we will be sending around a recording of this.